Alright, welcome back to the garage. So this week we are working on hydraulics, basically, bleeding everything out. So I'll show you what we've been doing. So what I have been doing is, I got a day when it was actually nice, so I could put the truck outside. So I've put our doors into epoxy. Like I said, they are in pretty good shape. Just a lot of little dents and dings and stuff near the bottom, right? But that's to be expected on, well, pretty much anything, really. So we can start body working those at some point when we get into doing all this stuff here. All right, so there is our master cylinder. I just have it loose inside the vise here. I made up a couple of lines, and we're going to bench bleed the master cylinder. So for those of you who have never done that, stay tuned. Okay, so bench bleeding the master. First things first, once you have your lines on and tight, we are going to fill it full of brake fluid from a clean container, of course, because brake fluid is hygroscopic, so it does absorb moisture. Okay, so you can see it's already bubbling. What's happening is the air is rising to the top so that the fluid can take its position. That's basically how hydraulics work. You can't compress a liquid. You can compress air. So what I usually do is, on the back of your master here, I take like a big punch or something, right? And what we're going to do is we're going to push the piston in. And you can see we're going to push a whole bunch of air out. And yeah, you're probably going to want a rag because you're going to get crap everywhere here. And remember that brake fluid will absolutely eat paint off, so just keep that in mind. So it's got a pretty good stream to it, I would say. We'll just go slow with it then. Grand idea here is you're going to keep bleeding it until there is no more bubbles coming up. Well, until you don't have an excess amount of bubbles. You're going to have a little bit of bubbling and stuff. You got to make sure you go the full stroke too, so that you get both chambers. Once you're happy with it, you're going to put your cap back on, you're going to take your lines off and do all that stuff. Okay, so I've assembled the master. I filled it up with fluid again and sprayed everything off to make sure I don't get brake fluid on freshly painted stuff. And what I've been doing is going around and snugging up all the fittings to make sure there's nothing that's going to dribble fluid anywhere. So far there's been no leaks, so we're good that way. So what we'll do is we'll go to the furthest from the master, and we're going to let it gravity bleed a little bit. So on this truck, the wheel that's the furthest from the master cylinder is the right rear, because our master cylinder's up here. Our lines come down and split, right, for our front brakes. They come up the frame rail to the line that's here. This one comes down, and then this one runs all the way over to here. So that's the one we're going to start bleeding with. Okay, so our clutch system. So obviously I made a line for the reservoir down to the master. Where the master goes through the firewall, it's hard to see here, but I made a gasket for it. And in addition to making a gasket for it, obviously I put a whole bunch of butyl sealer on it. And our line runs down, obviously, to our slave cylinder on the transmission. So that gets us a functional clutch now. Now when you go to install it, you're going to see, of course, that there's the rod that has to go through and into the end of the fork. So now I can put the side cover back on, and we have a clutch that works. Okay, I'll give you a rundown of how I bled this because I didn't get it on video. So first thing I did was fill the reservoir, of course, and then I cracked the line right here. And I took the rod that's on the back of this and I actuated it and got the fluid to start trickling out of here. Then I tightened it up and moved my way down. I did the same thing on the other one. And on the back side of the slave, I took, and there's a snap ring in there that I showed you before. I took that out, I pulled the plunger out, I filled it with fluid. I put that piston back in. I put the snap ring back in, and then I began bleeding the system. And by doing that, I had a pedal almost right away when I put it on the truck here. Then I got my wife to give me a hand. She pumped the pedal for me, and we bled it. And I did the same thing. I started with the line here, got the air out of it, moved down. I got the air out of the side of the slave there. And then I moved to the actual bleeder. So that's how we do it, or at least how I do it. Hopefully that helps someone. So we got to bleed our brakes next. Okay, so with the clutch bled, this is kind of what things look like. Now to get access to the bleeder on this thing, there's a good chance you're going to have to probably make up a wrench like I did. It's kind of a really weird angle to get into, so I ended up taking an old wrench I had and heating it up and sacrificing it for this task. But once you get it all bled, go ahead and press the clutch. You'll be good to go. Okay, let it go. So of course, the doors are in epoxy and they look pretty good actually, other than some dents and dings. And we've got the front half of the cab sound deadened. Put the shift boot on, you know, stuff like that. We have a functional clutch now, and I've put the cover back on the side of the transmission here. So that's now done. And I've been working towards getting the brakes bled out. Now the issue that I was having was I bled the master cylinder on the bench. Oh, I put on the ground cable too. And I put it on the truck, and then I could not get the rear to bleed. I could get fluid to the front brakes, but not to the rear. So I pulled it back off, and I got thinking about it. So inside our proportioning valve and combination valve here, right here underneath our stop switch, there is a valve that goes back and forth here, all the way from front to rear, right? And essentially what it is in the event of a brake hydraulic failure, because of course this is our front brakes, and at the back there's the rear brakes, and obviously this is the in from front and rear. Now in the event of a hydraulic failure, the shuttle valve moves from one side to the other and blocks the passage coming from the master cylinder so that you do not lose all of your hydraulic fluid. Now the problem is, I don't know if the truck that this one came off, if it had a brake line blow at some point before it was parked or whatever. So that shuttle valve has most likely slid across, and that's why we're not getting fluid. So what we have to do is take the switch out, and then inside there we'll have to take a small pick and slide the valve to the centered position. And then what we have is, I purchased one of these. This tool here is, well, it's a shuttle valve tool. So it slides and threads down in here, and then the pin holds the shuttle valve centered until you have brake pressure. So we're going to go ahead and do that this week. Unfortunately, time has not been on my side the last few days. Well, pretty much the last week. You know, that's life, unfortunately. But we are still making progress. Now, I did buy myself a new toy at an auction a few weeks ago. Bought myself a new tire machine. Well, new old tire machine. Started cleaning it up and fixing a few things on it. My Coates tire machine I do like quite a bit. The only problem with it is I am, at the most, I can do a 16.5 on this rim, or 16.5 rim on this machine. And in this day and age, that's kind of a problem. If you want to do a 16-inch on aluminum, even that's a problem with this tire machine. So I bought this Hoffman Monty, and they actually still sell this machine today. So this one's probably 20-25 years old, but works. A few little things I gotta fix. The duct bill is currently, I just got it soaking in degreaser to get all the slime and crap off it. I bought a set of the protectors that go on there. So we'll get it up and going, and that'll make our life a little easier doing tires around here. So we've got our Hoffman 40 balancer. So that's all I have for you this week. I realize it's been 2 weeks since the last video. Unfortunately, this time of year, I tend to have a lot of things going on at once. And, well, that takes what spare time I do have away from me. So it's unfortunate, but that's the reality of a hobby, really. So hopefully you've learned something. Hopefully it's been interesting, and hopefully we see you next week.